What do a snarky burger joint, an airport security line, and a green owl have in common? They've all mastered the internet better than most of us. Find out how to bring that same magic to your content in this episode. Hey, I'm Kassie. So, Sofia, when you're doom scrolling, what makes you actually stop?
So this morning, actually, perfect example. I woke up, doom scrolling. What do I see? Meshki with their matcha. It looks like, I thought it was like a new Instagram feature I woke up to. It was actually a reel, but it looked like they were pouring one matcha to another.
And this is a fashion brand?
Yeah. So I found it interesting that they're posting about matcha, and it didn't even have anything to do with like a matcha line or anything. But I, went and looked for other examples, and I saw that that's becoming a thing where people are like pouring one drink on top of another, or into another.
To explain this a little bit for people who have not seen this trend,
yes,
it looks like there's two posts and an Instagram feed kind of in the middle, and it looks like a drink or something is pouring into the next post. So it almost looks like there's movement on the screen.
Yeah.
So because that's unique, but really it's just one post. It's like a fake, Instagram background.
Really what made me stop scrolling was the interaction that I had on the post rather than just another girl in a cute outfit on the beach. It really just was, almost like three-dimensional on my screen.
And this is a fashion brand. So it's not even like they're a coffee or matcha company.
Exactly.
So the fact that they incorporated something unique made you stop.
Yeah.
And let's define this a little further. A lot of people don't realize, but there are actual success pillars that make people stop in their tracks. And that's voice, authenticity, community-driven engagement, and platform culture. And when we say platform culture, that means something that works on TikTok might not work on Instagram, or something that works on X might not work on Instagram as well. It's understanding the audience there and who you're speaking to and what kind of trends would work there. So something like that video where it has the Instagram feed built into it wouldn't translate to Facebook or it wouldn't translate to TikTok.
I also feel like engagement part of that part is like, what can a brand initiate on social that their users can repost on their accounts? For example, like when you go to a yoga studio, for example, and you post in their iconic mirror with their hashtag and their location, and everyone's like, okay, I want to go to this yoga studio and I want to take a picture in this. So I feel like that is like engagement, also community platform.
So what are 3 examples of brands that really have mastered this art of, creating a character or a persona on social media?
Definitely the first 2 that come to mind are TSA, Wendy's, and Duolingo.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Wendy's was known for, became popular because of their Twitter and X presence. And then they really expanded beyond that. But they're really known for their savage, sarcastic persona, which you wouldn't think because Wendy's looks like such a family brand. Mm-hmm. And when you see her logo, it's just a happy little Wendy's girl. And it's really risky, but really effective. And it works because it gets people to stop in their track. I was looking at some examples the other day. And if you've heard that trend with the 100 men versus a gorilla, have you heard that?
Yeah.
So they jumped on it right away. They're fast. They're smart. They're not waiting for it to die down. Mm-hmm. And they tweeted 100 fries versus one girlfriend who said she wasn't hungry. Hilarious and great engagement.
Great spin on their brand. I also love that it's just on X itself because I honestly love Twitter.
Yes. And they do a really good job. Like we talked about platform culture. Mm-hmm. What works on X would work on Threads, but not necessarily would it work on TikTok or Instagram. Yeah. They pay attention to their audience. Another one that was so funny is when Katy Perry did her space flight trip and, everyone made fun of how quick it was. And then when she came down, she kissed the earth, mm-hmm. She was so happy to be back on Earth. So they took the photo or they retweeted her photo and they added to it, I kissed the ground and I liked it instead of I kissed a girl and I liked it. So funny, easy, and they just got to add their personality to it, And it's one of those things that if brands go back and forth with legal or the team and they try to get approvals, they'll never get it done. You almost have to let your social media team have that, authority to be able to jump in the moment and take advantage.
Seen that firsthand experience with other agencies and clients.
Yes, but I think because they also know their brand voice so well, they can do it quick. They're not going back and forth. They're not unsure of who they are. They're very confident. What's another one that from Wendy's that you've seen?
I love how locked in I am with all the burgers and all the food items in the bird cage.
Hilarious. Yeah, because everyone keeps making fun of I'm so locked in. And I even saw a funny meme the other day and it was people be putting their phones on do not disturb to lock in just to move their clothes from the washer to the dryer. So like it's one of those, like everyone's making fun of the term locking in. So it's funny that.
And they made it literally locked in.
Yes. Also, something to note that Wendy's did. So I attended a social media conference last year, and I got to meet one of the head of social media for Wendy's. And she talked about a case study when they did National Roast Day. And I'm talking about roast, like roasting someone, making fun of somebody.
I can only imagine.
Yes. So in 2018, they did that on Twitter, and it was a hit. People were asking to get roasted by Wendy's, and Wendy's was roasting them just based off their profile. Well, then they wanted to take it a step forward, because now that the time, it was 2023 at the time, and that's TikTok was everyone's, favorite platform, and still is for many, like you and I.
Yes.
So they said, how can we make National Roast Day relevant again and not do the same thing we did on Twitter? So they decided to do it on TikTok. But what they did was they made an AI animated Wendy's, and they put this cartoon head on videos, and they had her roasting everyone with their voice, and it was hysterical.
I remember that.
Yes, it really went viral, and people were begging to get torn apart on TikTok, literally begging. And their stats. So when I looked up the stats, they had over 100 million views on TikTok just from National Roast Day. They got 200,000 new followers and a 30% increase in reach in just 72 hours from National Roast Day. So it goes to show that had nothing to do with buying food, nothing to do with their the breakfast items they keep pushing on TV, nothing to do with go to their store, their fries. It just literally was fun. And everyone associated the brand with a fun time.
People just wanted to get roasted by Wendy a couple years later.
Literally. So I think the big key takeaway there is to know your voice and really lean into that, but also be able to use it, quickly, jump on those trending topics and, carry that through. Yes. So what's another brand that you brought up?
Duolingo. And I loved, what really also stopped me on my scroll is when they announced the death of the Duolingo bird. And it was funny because my cousins and I, we all just joined his family plan of Duolingo. And so I sent it to my cousin, and I was like, Duolingo died. And he was like, what does that even mean? And I was like, honestly, I looked it up and it wasn't really clear. It was just like a rebrand moment. But it was just funny how they spinned it as like the bird died instead of just like coming out with a new logo.
They literally did. So they had the owl die, and they even had like the casket video. I mean, they went all out with this content, and it was a stunt for sure.
Yeah.
The stunt worked because everyone was like, where is the owl going? Is the owl resurrecting? Like,
what's going on with Duolingo?
Yes.
About my everyday streak.
Exactly. And Duolingo really has leaned into Gen Z and TikTok and more their voice. They've really adapted that kind of lingo, and they're chaotic for sure.
They're aggressive.
Yes. And they also do a lot of brand partnerships. So I saw recently now that Love Island is back, and Love Island's, a TV show that people has a cult following. People really love it. So, and Duolingo knows their Gen Z audience is big Love Island watcher. So they have been collabing on content together. So I saw a funny one because on Love Island, there's a popular segment where they ask like people's body counts, and everyone always dies on the episode because it's cringy.
Yeah.
And they did the holy airball trend that we actually talked about in a previous episode. And it was, what's your body count? And then it's Duolingo holding up the number of the streak of their learning the language. And then it says, holy freaking airball, not that kind of body count. And it's their streak of languages.
I think it's also funny because they're both like daily, like Love Island, new episode every day.
Yes.
Duolingo, you have to keep it up every single day.
Yes.
And that's when they get aggressive.
And I think more people are talking about learning another language more than ever because of Duolingo, and they're making it seem so attainable, and it's fun. It's not, like a Hooked on Phonics or some DVDs
like
or some boring, computer program
that you have to commit to. So
exactly. I also saw another chaotic one they put on Instagram Reels, which Instagram Reels, they really lean into the meme culture there. And they did one where, congratulations, a streak is born and you're the father. So that's crazy. Most brands would be like, what? But fun. They just
or when she leaves you on red, but you get a Duolingo notification from your friends.
Yes,
that's my favorite thing to do is add Duolingo with my friends.
Yes, so that was a funny one. They actually had the owl mascot sitting there like heartbroken on red.
Or that's honestly a great way to know like what my friends are up to.
Yes,
it'll be like your friend just hit their streak. Where are you?
Yeah, no, they do a fantastic job.
Engagement.
And when you look at it, their stuff is not heavily edited. It's really organic, authentic, and
not polished
and absurd.
Yeah.
The other example you brought up earlier is the TSA, which does not come to mind when you think of social media and a fun brand.
That is something that'll stop you when you're scrolling. You wouldn't even think about their social accounts. Like, no, you're in TSA line.
No, I literally just took 5 flights in the last 2.5 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I thought of them because I already follow them on social media because I know how funny they are. And if you don't follow them on social media, do yourself a favor. That is free entertainment. They do such a great job entertaining and educating the audience. It's one of those things where everyone has to fly at some point in their lives, and people get confused or flustered. Can I bring this in my carry-on? Can I not? I actually got in trouble with TSA or I guess their version of TSA in London because I had scissors in my carry-on, and apparently you could only have a certain size of scissor, so they had to bring out like a ruler and measure. And apparently I have full-size shears. So those obviously had to get confiscated. Yeah, I didn't realize. I was like, I always travel with baby scissors, but I guess I
have little eyebrow scissors.
Yes, but I had the full. But it was one of those things where like, Kassie, you can't do that. But if you follow TSA, they have a lot of legitimate questions that they answer, and they're just witty, and they also jump on trends. And even their Instagram bio, they have a hysterical bio. So for their tagline, it says travel tips and dad joke hits. And then in their information, it says princess of puns, king of canines, teller of travel tips, passion for prohibited items. Like, that's funny. It's not saying we're the government agency that, protects you on planes. They're being relatable and fun, and they're really educating. There was one brand that tweeted, if you were a power tool, it was Dremel. They tweeted, if you were a power tool, what would you be? And TSA is notorious for jumping in replies and comments. And they said, well, for starters, a prohibited item in your carry-on bag.
Or how about best of both worlds of Wendy's and TSA in the same thread?
Yes, that one. Wendy's had tweeted, they definitely called out TSA to trigger them a bit. And they said, do I still need a real ID if I have a Frosty key tag? And then TSA responded, yeah. And before you do, you even ask, no, we don't accept chicken nuggets as an alternative form of ID either. Like, they're just fun, very unserious.
Very unhinged.
Yes. I like another one I saw from TSA on Threads. They've been really adapting Threads. They really have been building a big presence there. Yes. Whereas I know some brands are still hesitant to lean into Threads.
Stick with X.
Yes. And if you're already on X, you could just duplicate the content there because it's very much a similar platform. There was one that said, we're just saying it's a little weird to brag about being so hydrated when you didn't even drink that water bottle in your carry-on. And it's so true with everyone with their giant Stanley cups trying to go through TSA.
Or how about not bringing your Costco ID as your real ID?
Yes, that was
like,
funny.
I don't care. Unhinged will call it any other major brand.
Yes. Another one I saw, which was also Unhinged, says, if you're traveling with taxidermy, please say something before we open the bag to Bambi's surprise, looking up at us unexpectedly. Okay, thanks. And these all have, a history of actual examples, and they'll even use photos.
Tips.
Yes. There was one too that came up was if peanut butter is a liquid or a solid.
I just Googled, is toothpaste a liquid or a solid? Because I was like, it's a paste, but I can't bring mine.
You have to have the travel size toothpaste. But what they do is they are building brand trust, and they're adding a personality to something that would seem boring or daunting, and something that people, a lot of people stress out when they're traveling and when they're flying, or people have flying anxiety. So I feel like TSA does a good job, making it fun.
Bringing some life to maybe a not so exciting.
So in the spirit of GOAT social media, and you heard it here, we're going to say what makes them goated. What makes them the greatest of all time on social media? Why are they winning? Why are they consistently growing?
Definitely their strong, consistent voice. I think for all of them, TSA, Wendy's, Duolingo, you're going to hear it, but how are you going to hear it? That's the surprise. And like I said, it's consistent.
They're aware of the platform they're on. Platform native content is huge. They write content for that platform. They're not just lazily repurposing something from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. They're really making sure that whatever the trend is, it's a trend there and it's not just copy paste to all platforms.
And willingness to take risks. For example, with Costco, taxidermy, Wendy's, they don't care. And well, not TSA specifically, but all of them, they'll call you out roast day.
Yes, they're taking big risks. And there are times probably where it flops, but I always say no one really knows the flops, but everyone knows the viral moments. And what's the worst? If someone doesn't see that post and no one sees that post, yeah, exactly. So it's those risks that they're taking, and it's being bold stands out, and being safe. It really blends in. You're blending in with everybody. Everyone's shouting on social media right now. So what's going to make them actually stop and listen? And another thing we can talk about is the VRP framework that they all use. So VRP stands for voice, relevance, and personality. Do you want to break that down more?
Yeah. So voice, sound human, avoid robotic. Language, which is something that we say all the time, even talking to chat, sound less AI, sound less robotic, give me more human-like responses. So you can really see with all of their accounts just how raw and authentic it is in their copy and even their visuals. They're not state-of-the-art Photoshop, Illustrator images. They're just iPhone note screenshots or text message screenshots.
And the next one, relevance, as we talked about, it's staying current and on top of what's going on in the news and current trends. Even like TSA talking about Real ID.
I was going to say that.
Everyone's not talking about Real ID a year from now. Like that's a big change now. Or with the Katy Perry kissing the ground and Wendy's writing on that. If you think like, oh, we're going to use the Katy Perry photo 6 months from now, everyone already forgot about that moment. You have to jump on it when you can, when it's relevant, when people are searching about it.
Or Love Island,
Exactly.
Love Island's only in the summer, so they posted 6 months from now. Everyone already forgot.
Yes, so it's staying on top of that. And then it's a personality. I think a lot of people forget that social media was created and invented for social purposes. It needs to have that social feel. It needs to have the engagement, like that into a real person. Yes, and all three of these brands that we're talking about, there's not one social media manager. These are large brands. It's a social team. But yet they have a personality that's united and they're bringing that personality to life. And it's important because in the audience, it's instantly recognizable and the audience also trusts you. You're building that authority.
And it looks and sounds cohesive. From Wendy's, it sounds like it's just Miss Wendy, but it's really a whole social team.
Yes. And it goes back to, a basic marketing principle with the brand archetype. If you have a brand archetype that you can start with, what do you want to be? Do you want to be the friend that's supportive, relatable, but somewhat controversial? Or do you want to be
the rebel who's bold, edgy, not afraid to challenge the norm?
Yes. There's also the jester, which is playful, witty, entertainment driven, which I would almost argue that Wendy's is more the jester with their roast and their teasing.
There's also the caregiver, compassionate, helpful, and purpose-led.
Yes, and I think we have a lot of clients that fall into that caregiver category because we work a lot with healthcare.
I mean, some are for caregivers.
Exactly, and you have to build that, being helpful, being compassionate so that if someone knows they're going to call them, in their time of need, or if they need help for their family, they're going to be met with the same love and compassion on the phone that they would on social media if they're sending us a direct message, etc. So if you're listening and you're wondering, okay, so how can I apply that to my small brand? I don't have a giant team. Maybe you're a team of one. Maybe you're an influencer, or maybe you just have, limited resources. Well, we have a small brand playbook based off these three brands that you can use today and get started. So the first is with Wendy. Sofia, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, they adopted an edge, but they weren't full on snarky. One tip that a business can do is define 3 personality objectives that define their brand's tone. Similar like how Wendy's did with their roasting.
Definitely. Another can be taken from TSA is to educate and entertain. Sometimes that mundane content can still be fun, can still be relatable, and can still be enjoyable on social media. So any small business should batch 5 short myth-busting reels to start building credibility, make that fun. What's something that you get asked all the time and turn that into content. What about Duolingo?
Yeah, Duolingo definitely does a great job of leaning into memes and culture that are relevant at the time. So that's truly the power of having a social team behind their back, is staying on top of it and also getting it while it's still hot.
Yeah, if you're a small brand, what you can do is schedule a weekly trend hunt, a little sprint, whether it be every Monday morning or every Friday morning, look what's trending on the news or on social media, and then capture and adapt content or sounds or formats that are trending, and you can jump in the topics. And, it's almost an age-old PR term called newsjacking, where you're jumping on the current news, but also the same thing of trends and being relevant. Even if you don't have that team, everyone has, 5 to 10 minutes scrolling on their phone where they can make that really productive.
That really find what's working and how it can work for you.
Exactly. So I'm going to challenge our listeners to post one audience-centric, personality-driven piece this week. Thinking about what you've learned from these 3 brands, how can you make your content really have a persona? And if you want to tag us or DM us at You Heard It Here podcast, we're going to feature the best example on our social media. And I'm excited to see what you're all working with.
Me too. Forward to it. With that, thank you for listening.
The You Heard It Here podcast, and we'll see you for the next episode.
Bye.